The history of the Belle Reve sugar plantation begins not in soil, but on paper. The first and most complete records are the Dubois ledgers, a series of 7 leather-bound volumes spanning from 1825 to 1848. They are preserved today in the St. James Parish Archives, their pages crisp and the ink unfaded. The penmanship belongs to the proprietor, Auguste Dubois, a man known for his precision in all matters of business. His script is flawless, each number and letter formed with a draftsman's care. To read the ledgers is to witness the construction of a small and brutally efficient kingdom. The early entries detail the acquisition of the land, nearly 2,000 acres of prime Louisiana bottomland along a slow bend in the Mississippi. There are notations for the clearing of cypress and the draining of marsh. There are receipts for the purchase of seed cane from Cuba. The largest initial expenditures, however, are listed under the heading Stock Acquisition. Here, in columns ruled with perfect linearity, are the names of the first enslaved people brought to Belle Reve. Names like Jean-Charles, valued at $400 for his skill as a carpenter. Names like Marie, valued at $300 for her youth and strength in the fields. Each name is followed by an estimated age, a list of skills, and a monetary value that fluctuates with the market price of cotton and sugar. From 1828 onward, the ledgers tell a story of immense and uninterrupted success. The columns for sugar and molasses production show a yield that doubles, then triples. Dubois's methods were modern, his mill ruthlessly productive. The ledgers track every barrel shipped, every dollar earned. Expenses are listed with equal care: the cost of new machinery, the price of iron for repairing tools, the purchase of salt pork and cornmeal to feed his workforce. It is a portrait of masterful, profitable husbandry. The plantation, by 1832, was considered a model of the new Southern agricultural enterprise. It is in a private collection of letters, housed at the Boston Mercantile Society, that the first deviation from this pristine record appears. The letter is dated October 17, 1832, written by a young commodities broker named Thomas Reed. Reed was touring the South to establish trade connections, and his correspondence with his sister, Eleanor, was meant to serve as both a personal diary and a business report. His early letters from Louisiana are filled with observations on crop prices and shipping logistics, but his letter from Belle Reve is different. He begins with praise. "My host, Monsieur Dubois," he writes, "is a gentleman of the highest order. His home is a marvel of French architecture, set amongst oaks of a size you could not imagine. The operation he commands here is a testament to the power of industry and strict management. There is no waste, no idleness. Every hand is at its task from sunrise to sunset, and the result is a quality of sugar that will command the highest prices in Boston." Reed describes the fields, the scale of the cane stretching to the horizon. He details the sugar house, the steam engines, the kettles. His descriptions align perfectly with the output numbers in Dubois's ledgers. He then remarks on the enslaved population. "The Negroes here are well fed and clothed in sturdy cotton," he notes. Monsieur Dubois takes pride in the health of his stock, as he calls them. He insists a healthy worker is a productive one. "There is none of the outward brutality I was warned I might see. The order is maintained by a quiet, unyielding routine. There is no singing in the fields here, Eleanor. There is only the sound of the cane being cut." It is this quiet that first seems to unnerve him. There is a stillness to this place that is difficult to describe. In a population of this size, one would expect the sounds of life, the cry of a baby, the laughter of children. "I have been here 3 days and have seen no small children, not one." I asked Monsieur Dubois of this, and he simply smiled and said that they are kept in a nursery, away from the dangers of the mill and fields for their own protection. It was a sensible answer, yet it did not feel true. The tone of the letter shifts. Reed's crisp, businesslike prose becomes hesitant, his sentences shorter. "Last night, I could not sleep. The air is heavy here, thick with the smell of the swamp and the boiling sugar. I heard a sound from beneath the house, a low, rhythmic noise. It was not the house settling. It was mechanical, but not like the engines in the mill. It was a sound like a heavy bolt being drawn, again and again, with long pauses in between. It stopped after an hour. The following section of the letter describes a conversation Reed overheard. He was walking the grounds near the ancillary buildings behind the main house when he heard two of the white overseers speaking. He did not recognize them from the fields. They were large men who carried themselves like guards, not farmers. "They did not see me," he writes. "They spoke in low tones. One mentioned that the yield from the new stock was promising. The other complained about the cost of lime and iron. The first man laughed and said that Monsieur Dubois spares no expense on his pits. They then moved off, and I retreated to the house, for I felt their eyes upon the grounds as if searching for something." Reed tries to make sense of the words. "I assume they spoke of the sugar refinement process," he writes. "Perhaps the pits are the vats for clarifying the juice. Yet their tone was not that of men discussing agriculture. They spoke of it as one might speak of livestock breeding. It was cold, detached." This interpretation, however, is contradicted by the plantation ledgers themselves. Dubois's records for 1832 are exhaustive. They list purchases of lumber for a new barn, copper tubing for the refinery, and a new steam engine. There are no entries for the construction or maintenance of anything that could be described as pits. There is, however, one anomalous entry from August of that year. Under general maintenance, an expense is recorded for 200 square feet of iron grating, custom forged, and 30 sets of interior door clasps and bolts, heavy make. The supplier is listed as a specialty metalworks in New Orleans, a firm known for making prison and asylum doors. The purpose of the purchase is noted simply as cellar improvements. The final paragraphs of Thomas Reed's letter are penned in a hurried, unsteady hand. The ink is spattered in several places. "Eleanor, something is deeply wrong at Belrive. This afternoon I witnessed something I cannot explain. A line of Negro women, perhaps a dozen, were marched from a distant cabin. They were not dressed for the fields. They wore simple, undyed cotton shifts. They did not walk toward the mill or the laundry. They were led by one of the guards I saw earlier toward a low door at the back of the main house, a cellar door. They did not speak. Their faces were empty. They looked young, all of them, strong. But their eyes, Eleanor, their eyes were vacant. I must make my excuses and leave this place. My business here is concluded, but Monsieur Dubois insists I stay until the end of the week. His hospitality has become a cage. He watches me. I see him from my window, standing under the oaks, simply watching my room. The sound from below came again last night, louder this time. It was the sound of the bolts, and then another sound, a single, high wail that was cut short. It was not a sound of pain. It was a sound of arrival. And then silence. I have tried to reconcile what I see with what I know of the world. A man of God and industry like Dubois would not. He could not. There is an order here, but it is the order of a tomb. He spoke of his enterprise not as a farm, but as a factory, and the crop was not of the cane field, but of the letter ends there. The bottom quarter of the page has been torn away. The archival notes from the Boston Mercantile Society state simply that this was the last correspondence ever received from Thomas Reed. His firm made inquiries, but the St. James Parish Sheriff reported that Mr. Reed had concluded his business with Monsieur Dubois and had taken a riverboat north to Natchez. There was no record of him ever arriving. The official history of a place like Belrive exists in two forms, the private and the public. The Dubois ledgers were the private record, a meticulous account of assets and profits. The public record was kept by the parish of St. James. It was in these documents, births, deaths, marriages, and property taxes, that a citizen, free or enslaved, was formally acknowledged to exist. The parish records, bound in thick, decaying buckram, were meant to be the final arbiter of fact. They were a testament to a community's life, a chronicle of its people from cradle to grave. But in the case of Belrive, the public record is not a chronicle. It is a void. An examination of the St. James Parish baptismal register between 1830 and 1845 reveals a peculiar and consistent anomaly. For nearly every other plantation in the parish, the entries, though brief, follow a standard form. An entry for the neighboring Levasseur plantation from 1833 reads, March 2nd, infant, female, slave, child of Anne, property of Gerard Levasseur, christened Celeste. The mother is named. Her status as property and the name of her owner are clearly noted. This was standard practice. A child's lineage, even among the enslaved, was a matter of record, for it helped establish the owner's claim to his property. The entries for Belle Reve follow a different pattern. A typical entry from the same year reads, April 19th, infant, male, slave, property of Auguste Dubois, christened Joseph, mother, unknown. This is not an isolated incident. From 1832 onward, not a single infant baptism from Belle Reve lists a mother's name. There are dozens of such entries. Mother, unknown. Mother, not listed. Mother, blank. Page after page, the names of the children are entered. Isaac, Therese, Abraham, Delphine, each one an island, a life officially begun without origin. They are simply the property of Auguste Dubois. At first, this might be dismissed as an idiosyncrasy of the plantation's owner, or perhaps a clerical shortcut by a lazy parish priest. But the meticulous nature of every other record associated with Dubois makes laziness an unlikely explanation. His property tax filings for the same period are a marvel of detail, listing his enslaved population by name, age, and skill, arguing for precise valuations down to the last dollar. A man who counts every barrel of molasses would not permit such vagueness in the accounting of his most valuable assets, unless the vagueness itself served a purpose. The mystery deepens in the parish mortality logs. Here, another pattern emerges, one that runs contrary to the baptismal register, yet is strangely parallel to it. Between 1833 and 1840, the records show an unusually high number of deaths among young women at Belle Reve. The official causes are listed as childbed fever, wasting sickness, or simply fever. The names are recorded: Susanna, age 19, Hester, age 17, Marie Anne, age 20. On their own, these entries are tragic, but not extraordinary. Disease was rampant, and the dangers of childbirth were a brutal reality. The discrepancy arises when these names are cross-referenced with the primary source of Belle Reve's population, the Dubois property ledgers. The ledgers, with their exhaustive lists of every individual purchased or born on the plantation, contain no record of a Susanna, a Hester, or a Marie Anne. According to the plantation's own meticulous accounting, these women did not exist. They were never purchased. They were not born in the slave quarters. Yet the parish, the official record keeper of life and death, states unequivocally that they died at Belle Reve. They are ghosts in the official history, women who appear in the public record only at the moment of their death. A possible key to this silence is found in the scattered papers of a former parish clerk, a man named Jean-Paul Martin. His duties included transcribing the notices of birth and death into the official registers. A small, water-damaged personal journal, discovered in the attic of the old parish hall, contains his private thoughts from 1835. His entries are brief, written in a neat but anxious script. An entry from May 11th reads, "The overseer from Belle Reve came today, a man named Vance. He does not smile. He handed me the list for the month. 4 births to be recorded, 4 boys. As always, no mothers. I asked him. I said, 'Mr. Vance, for the record, who are the mothers?' He looked at me for a long time. He said, 'They are the property of Monsieur Dubois.' That is all the record requires." Martin's anxiety grows over time. In a later entry, dated July 2nd, he writes, "Another notice from Belle Reve, a death this time, a girl named Dinah. Fever." I searched the tax rolls and the Dubois ledgers again. There has never been a Dinah at Belle Reve. This is the 5th this year. A girl arrives from nowhere, dies, and is entered into the books. It feels like a sin to write a name when you know it is a lie, or at least not the whole truth. But what part is the lie? Her name or her absence from the other books? He begins to see a correlation. An entry from the following winter is more direct. December 8th, 2 births from Belle Reve this week, both marked Mother Unknown, and 1 death notice, a young woman, name unknown, of a female complaint. Mr. Vance claimed her name was forgotten in the sickness. How does a man forget the name of his property? It is not possible. I am recording numbers that do not add up. I am documenting a phantom population. The parish priest tells me not to question the affairs of Monsieur Dubois. He says Monsieur Dubois is a generous patron of the church. He pays for the records to be kept, not for them to be understood. The final extant entries in Martin's journal reveal a man wrestling with his conscience. In one, he notes the delivery of a new baptismal register, a fine, leather-bound book paid for by Auguste Dubois himself. He writes, "The pages are clean, perfect, ready for more blank spaces where the mothers should be." His last coherent entry is dated March 1st, 1836. I have laid the books side by side, the birth register and the death log. For every 10 motherless infants Dubois registers, 5 to 7 women who do not exist in his property records die of childbed fever within the same season. The numbers track too closely. It is a formula, an equation of life and death, and I am the one writing it down. I cannot be a part of this. It is an unmaking of people, a deliberate erasure. I must speak to someone. Father Michel travels to see the bishop next week. I will give him a letter. This is the final entry in the journal of Jean-Paul Martin. According to the archival notes accompanying the document, the following 20 pages have been sliced from the binding with a knife. Parish employment records from 1836 show that the position of clerk was vacated in the 2nd week of March. The reason noted is dereliction of duty. There is no record of Martin's whereabouts after this date. And in the archives of the Archdiocese of New Orleans, there is no letter from a parish clerk in St. James concerning the records of Belle Reve plantation. The silence of the parish was, it seems, carefully kept. Silent warehouses of history often yield their secrets not through grand, complete volumes, but through the detritus left in their corners. Such is the case with the account book of Elias Vance. It is not a formal ledger like those kept by his employer, Auguste Dubois. It is a small, cheap book, its cover warped by damp and its pages stained with what looks like mud and tallow. It was found in 1957, tucked inside a collapsed section of chimney during the demolition of an old overseer's cottage miles from the original Belle Reve property line. The hand is rough, the spelling phonetic, but the purpose of the book is clear. This was Vance's private record, the nuts and bolts of his work, a logbook of the machinery he managed. The first several pages are mundane. They list feed allocations for mules, quantities of nails and lumber for repairing fences, and tallies of sugarcane bundles cut by field hands. The entries are dated and methodical. June 3, 1834. 12. Waib nail for shed roof. 2 new axle pins for cart 4. Sent Tom for lime. It is the bookkeeping of a practical, unlettered man, responsible for the daily function of a large enterprise. The language is purely transactional. It is on the 9th page that the nature of the entries begins to change. A new heading is scrawled at the top, Acquisitions. Beneath it, the entries are stark. June 20, 1834, from Fontaine Auction, 1 lot, 6 head, prime stock, condition good, cost $1,800, transported after dark, secured in pen 3. The term head was common parlance for enslaved people, but stock and pen were terms reserved for animals. Furthermore, the Dubois ledgers for that year show no purchase from a Fontaine auction. This was an off-the-books transaction. The entries continue in this vein for the next 2 years. July 14th, from River Trader, 2 head, Virginia stock, young, cost $7.50, to pen 1. September 2nd, from Caraway Dispersal, 4 head, good hips, strong teeth, cost $12.50, move them by the back road, secured by midnight. These acquisitions are frequent, almost monthly. They represent a significant and steady influx of human property, none of whom ever appear in the official Bellerive ledgers or the St. James Parish tax rolls. They were brought to the plantation under the cover of darkness and, according to Vance's terminology, secured. Halfway through the book, a new type of record-keeping appears. The heading reads, Yields. The entries below are stripped of all humanity. They are reduced to a chillingly simple formula: a date, a pen number, a description of the outcome, and a final disposition. November 5th, 1834. Pen 2, male, healthy, dispatched to N.O. broker via boatman. November 18th, Pen 4, female, strong cry, dispatched to N.O. broker. December 1st, Pen 1, male, small but sound, dispatched. The term dispatched appears again and again. These infants, designated only by sex, and a brief assessment of their quality, are the yield. They are products, shipped out almost immediately after birth. The account book lists dozens of these yields per year, a rate of birth far exceeding what would be natural for even a large enslaved population. The destination is always the same: a New Orleans broker. This aligns with the Dubois ledgers, which show large, regular cash deposits from a New Orleans commodities brokerage firm, but list the source of the income simply as sundries. Vance's account book also chronicles the other side of this brutal equation. A section titled Losses appears alongside the yields. January 12, 1835. Pen 3, stock expired, fever, disposed of. February 8th, Pen 5, stock expired, bleeding, disposed of. February 21st, Pen 3, stock failed to yield, barren, disposed of. The women, referred to only as stock, are recorded with the same cold detachment as a failed crop or a diseased animal. Their deaths, or their failure to produce, are practical problems to be managed. The term disposed of is never elaborated upon. It simply marks the end of their entry in the book. These are the nameless women who appear fleetingly in the parish death logs, given placeholder names before vanishing from history. Elias Vance's book was where they were truly accounted for, not as people, but as units of production that had ceased to function. The most disturbing entries are not the lists, but the scattered marginalia, the notes Vance wrote to himself. Next to an entry about a failed yield, he has scribbled, "Check teeth on new stock, more close. This one was too old." Beside a list of supplies, he notes, "More iron for the shackle rings. Straps are fraying." These notes provide a glimpse into the mechanics of the operation. This was not a nursery. It was a factory. The mention of pens, shackle rings, and the constant need for security suggest a place of confinement, not care. One particular entry from the summer of 1836 stands out. It is more detailed than the others. July 29th, Pen 6, difficult yield, stock fought, had to use the strap. Product damaged, bruised on head. Broker will pay half. She will not last the week. Move her to the sick pen. A few lines down, an entry under losses for August 4th reads, Pen 6 stock, expired, disposed of. This is the closest Vance comes to describing an act of violence, yet it is still framed in the language of damaged goods and operational difficulties. The humanity of the woman and of the child is entirely absent. The final section of the book is even more cryptic. The pages are badly water-damaged. The ink bled into illegibility in many places, but the headings are clear. One is titled Feeding Schedule. It lists quantities of corn mush and salted water. The amounts are small, barely enough for sustenance. Another is titled Cycle Tracking. It is a grid with women identified only by a number and a physical attribute. No, 7, tall. No, 12, scar on cheek. Beside the numbers are a series of marks and symbols, a crude charting of their fertility. It is the record-keeping of a stock breeder. The last legible page seems to be a summary of operations for the year 1837. It reads, Total acquisitions, 28 head. Total yield, 19 live product, 3 stillborn loss. Total stock expired, 11. Net productive rate, 8. Profit to master, $7,600. Below this summary, a final, chilling sentence is scrawled, as if an afterthought. Clerk at the parish house asking questions again. Master says to handle it. He will not ask again. The remainder of the book is a ruin. The pages are fused into a solid block by moisture and time. Whatever records Elias Vance kept after 1837 are lost, but what survives is enough. It is the missing piece of the puzzle, the operational manual for the breeding pits. It fills the silences left in the Dubois ledgers and the parish registers. It confirms that the women were not residents of Belle Reve. They were raw material, acquired for a single purpose. Their children were the product, shipped and sold before they could be named. And the women themselves, once their purpose was served or their bodies failed, were simply disposed of. The existence of the breeding pits, if true, depended on a conspiracy of silence. It required the complicity of parish clerks, the willful blindness of neighbors, and the cold, transactional secrecy of men like Elias Vance. But secrets of such a magnitude are difficult to keep perfectly contained. They seep into the world as rumor, as fear, as a sense of wrongness that cannot be articulated but can be felt. Such a feeling is palpable in the letters of the Reverend Micah Cole, a traveling Methodist preacher whose circuit took him through the Louisiana sugar parishes in the winter of 1841. Cole's letters, addressed to his brother in Ohio, were his only confidant on the road. They are filled with descriptions of the landscape, the state of the congregations he ministered to, and his own spiritual anxieties. He arrived at Belle Reve in early December, invited to stay for a week by Auguste Dubois, who was known for his ostentatious, if infrequent, displays of public piety. Cole's first letter from the plantation is filled with admiration. "Brother, I have found a most generous host in Monsieur Auguste Dubois," he writes, dated December 5, 1841. His estate, which he calls Belle Reve, is a testament to what a man of vision and industry can achieve in this fertile land. The main house is grander than any I have seen outside of Philadelphia, and his hospitality is without limit. He has made a generous donation to our missionary fund and has asked me to preach to his people, both the white overseers and the Negro servants, this coming Sunday. He speaks of building a chapel on his lands. He seems a man of genuine Christian conviction, eager to provide for the spiritual well-being of all souls under his care. Cole describes the order and cleanliness of the plantation. There is a quiet discipline here that is most remarkable. The servants are well clothed and move about their duties with a silent efficiency. One does not hear the sounds of discord or idleness that plague so many of these large establishments. Monsieur Dubois believes that a disciplined soul is a soul closer to God, and he has structured his entire world upon this principle. It is, in its own way, a model community, but as the week progresses, a different tone emerges in the letters. Cole, a man trained to observe the state of human souls, begins to notice things that contradict the plantation's placid surface. His letter from December 8th is shorter, the script more cramped. "There is a strangeness here I cannot name. I preached to the Negroes yesterday in the shade of a great oak. Their faces were like stone. They listened, they nodded when I spoke of salvation, but their eyes were empty. There was no light in them. I have seen hardship and suffering in my travels, but this was something else. It was not sorrow. It was absence, as if the person within had long ago departed, leaving only the shell to perform its duties." He continues, "I see none of the natural life of a community. There are no children playing, no mothers nursing infants. When I asked my host about this, he gave me the same answer he gives all visitors, that the children are kept in a separate, safer location. He calls it the nursery. A sensible precaution, he says. Yet I have not been invited to see this nursery. When I inquired, he changed the subject with a practiced ease. It is the nights that truly begin to disturb Reverend Cole. His room was in the west wing of the main house, a guest suite of considerable luxury, but it was located directly above the rear of the house, where the cellar was. "A sound wakes me in the deep of night," he writes on December 10th. It is a sound I have heard before in the north, in the iron foundries of Pittsburgh. It is the sound of heavy metal striking metal, a rhythmic, deliberate clang. It echoes from beneath the floorboards. It is followed by a long silence, and then it comes again. When I asked one of the house servants what the noise was, she looked at the floor and whispered that it was only the old boiler for the winter heating. But brother, the air is warm. We have not had a fire in the hearth since I arrived. Cole's spiritual certainty begins to waver, replaced by a growing dread. He feels the presence of a profound and hidden sin. Yesterday, I attempted to walk the grounds behind the main house toward a series of low, windowless buildings I had seen from my window. Before I had taken 20 paces, I was met by a man. He was not one of the field overseers. He was a large, hard-faced man who introduced himself as Mr. Vance, the chief steward. His greeting was polite enough, but his eyes were cold. He told me that Monsieur Dubois preferred his guests not to wander for fear of snakes in the tall grass. He stood in my path until I turned and walked back to the house. From my window, I watched him. He did not return to his duties. He stood there for nearly an hour, watching the back of the house. The final letter from Belle Reve is dated December 12th, the day of Cole's scheduled departure. It is written on a single, crumpled sheet of paper, the handwriting nearly illegible, as if penned in haste and terror. Brother, I must leave this place. I know now what this house is built upon. It is not built on Christian charity. It is a monument to a sin so vast I cannot comprehend it. Last night, the sounds were different. It was not just the metal clang. After it, I heard a woman's cry. It was not a cry of pain, not a shriek. It was a low, desperate moan, the sound a soul makes when all hope is lost. I could not stay in my room. I crept down the main staircase. The house was dark and silent. I was drawn to a door at the end of a long service corridor. It was thick oak, bound with iron straps. A heavy bar was drawn across it. From behind the door, I could hear a faint sound, the sound of weeping. Not one voice, but many, a chorus of quiet, endless grief. And beneath it, another sound, the thin, hungry cry of a newborn infant. I stood there, frozen. The air grew cold. The door was cold to the touch. I heard footsteps approaching from the main hall. It was Monsieur Dubois. He was not carrying a lamp, but he moved through the darkness as if it were broad daylight. He did not seem surprised to see me. He simply smiled. It was not a warm smile. It was the smile of a predator. He asked if I was unwell. He said sometimes the swamp gases cause guests to have vivid dreams. I stammered an excuse and returned to my room. I have not slept. The sun is rising, and I am packing my bags. Dubois's smile, it was a mask, and I saw what was behind it. I saw the pit. He did not need to show me. I saw it in his eyes. He is not a planter. He is a harvester of flesh. The crop he raises here is human souls, and he grinds them into profit with the terrible machinery of damnation he has built beneath his home. The letter contains one final, chilling postscript. As I write this, a small, unmarked cart is being loaded by the river dock. It is a small cart, but its cargo is heavy. It is covered with a canvas tarp. Mr. Vance is overseeing it. I pray to God for the souls in this place, for they are in a hell far deeper than any I have preached. I fear my prayers are not heard here. God does not live in Belle Reve. According to the records of the Methodist Episcopal Church, South, Reverend Micah Cole completed his Louisiana circuit, but his health failed him shortly thereafter. He returned to Ohio a broken man, and his journals from that point on are filled with incoherent ramblings about the House of Wailing and the sound of the bolt. He died in an asylum in 1845. His letters are the last known eyewitness account from a visitor to Belle Reve Plantation. After him, it seems, the silence was complete. The end of Belle Reve was as abrupt and violent as its operation was cold and systematic. For years, the plantation had been an island of unnatural quiet and immense wealth. Then, on the night of August 29, 1848, it became a pillar of fire. The official account of that night is pieced together from two primary sources: the hastily written report of the St. James Parish Sheriff, a man named Henri Tissot, and the testimonies of neighboring plantation owners collected in the days that followed. As with everything concerning Belle Reve, the records are contradictory, filled with gaps and a pervasive sense of events not fully seen or understood. Sheriff Tissot's report begins simply. At approximately 10 o'clock post-meridium, I was alerted by a rider from the Levasseur plantation that a great fire was visible to the east in the direction of the Dubois property. Upon my arrival, an hour later, the main house of Belle Reve was fully engulfed in flames. The fire was of such an intensity that the outbuildings, including the sugar mill and slave quarters, had also caught. The heat was immense. Approach was impossible. Tissot describes a scene of chaos. The Dubois overseers, led by a man named Vance, were attempting to organize the Negroes into a bucket brigade from the river, but their efforts were futile against such a blaze. Monsieur Dubois himself was not seen. Vance claimed his employer was trapped in his office on the second floor. There was no possibility of rescue. The sheriff notes the speed of the fire, remarking that it consumed the old house as if it were tinder, not seasoned cypress and brick. The testimonies of the neighbors, taken the following day, add a layer of confusion to the narrative. Gerard Levasseur, whose property bordered Belle Reve to the south, stated under oath, "The fire did not start in one place. I saw it from my veranda. It bloomed from a dozen windows at once. The entire house lit up like a lantern. It was not natural. It was as if it was set from within, in every room simultaneously." Another neighbor, Charles Brissot, reported something more disturbing. "Before the flames, I heard a sound carried on the wind. It was not shouting. It was a kind of chanting, a low, rhythmic sound coming from the direction of the Dubois slave quarters. It stopped the moment the great house went up in fire." The cause of the fire was never determined. Sheriff Tissot's report speculates that a lantern may have been overturned, but the eyewitness accounts suggest a more deliberate act. No official investigation was ever launched. Auguste Dubois was declared dead, his body presumed consumed by the inferno. With no heir, the plantation and its assets, including its surviving enslaved population, were to be seized by the parish and sold at auction. It is in the aftermath of the fire that the story turns from tragedy to horror. Tissot's report continues with the events of the following morning. At dawn, the main house had been reduced to a smoldering ruin of chimneys and foundation stones. As my men and I were surveying the damage, Mr. Vance approached us. He seemed agitated. He insisted that the cellar beneath the house, which he claimed was used for storing valuables, had survived the fire, and that he needed to secure its contents for the parish. He warned us that the area was unstable. The sheriff, his suspicions aroused by Vance's demeanor, ignored the warning. I accompanied Mr. Vance to the rear of the foundation. There, a great iron door, blackened but intact, was set into the brickwork. It was barred from the outside with a heavy iron beam. My deputy noted that this was unusual. A cellar for valuables would typically be locked, not barred from the outside. Vance claimed it was an added security measure against theft. What they found inside is described in the sheriff's report with a stark, professional brevity that does little to conceal the shock of the discovery. Upon removing the bar and opening the iron door, a powerful and foul odor emerged. The cellar was not a single room, but a series of narrow, brick-lined corridors leading to a number of smaller chambers. The air was thick with smoke, and the smell of lime and sickness. Along the walls of the main corridor, we found iron rings set into the brick at intervals of 5 feet. From several of these rings hung short lengths of chain. The report becomes more detailed. Each of the smaller chambers, 6 in total, was sealed not with a wooden door, but with a grating of heavy iron bars, like a cell. The locking mechanisms were bolted from the corridor side. Inside the first 5 cells, the scene was the same. The floors were packed earth, covered in a thin layer of dirty straw. In the corner of each was a simple bucket. The cells were empty. The bars on the doors were unlocked. The final cell was different. The sixth cell door was still locked. From within, we could hear a faint sound, a scraping. Vance protested, saying it was merely rats. I ordered my deputy to break the lock. Inside, we found a young Negro woman. She was emaciated, covered in soot, and chained by her ankle to a ring bolted to the floor. She did not speak. She only stared at us. Her eyes, I can only describe them as vacant of all human reason. In the straw beside her lay the body of a newborn infant. It had been dead for some time. This is the only official, documented evidence of what lay beneath the house at Belle Reve. The sheriff's report notes that the woman was taken into parish custody, but there is no further record of her. No name, no testimony, no indication of what became of her. She simply vanishes from the page. The story might have ended there, a horrific but contained local scandal. But nature intervened. Tissot's report concludes with an addendum written 2 days later. All efforts to fully investigate the Belle Reve property have been halted. On the afternoon of August 31st, the levee to the north gave way under the strain of the summer rains. The Mississippi has flooded the lower parishes. The Dubois land is completely submerged. The ruins of the house, and whatever secrets remain in its cellar, are now under 10 feet of river water. Evidence, if any more existed, has been washed away. The Great Flood of 1848 was devastating, reshaping the landscape and erasing boundaries. When the waters finally receded, months later, the Belle Reve plantation was gone. The rich topsoil had been scoured away, leaving behind a barren expanse of mud and swamp. The foundations were buried. The cellars were filled. The land was declared unusable, and the name Belle Reve was slowly forgotten, becoming just another piece of the ever-changing Louisiana coastline. The fire had exposed the secret, but the flood had buried it again, deeper than any cellar. The only remaining question was about the other inhabitants of those cells. The sheriff's report found 5 of the 6 cells empty and unlocked. Where their occupants went on the night of the fire is a question no document answers. The land that was once Belle Reve remains empty. After the flood of 1848, the parish sold the tract to a lumber concern, but the ground was deemed too soft for heavy equipment. It was later acquired by the state and designated as part of a spillway project that was never completed. Today, it is an unnamed stretch of marsh and cypress stumps, accessible only by flat-bottom boat. There are no markers. No sign remains of the great house or the mill. The official maps of St. James Parish show only a blank space, a forgotten piece of the delta. State surveyors mapping the area in the 1970s noted anomalous soil composition and unusual magnetic readings in the area where the main house was believed to have stood. Locals who hunt the backwaters have their own name for the place. They call it the Trembling Ground. They say the earth there is never still, that it shifts and settles in ways the surrounding swamp does not. On quiet nights, when the air is heavy, a low, rhythmic vibration can sometimes be felt more than heard, and some claim that if you listen closely at the water's edge, you can hear a sound rising from deep within the mud. It is not the sound of the swamp. It is the sound of a heavy bolt being drawn and locked, again and again.